Hey guys, Mana here, bringing you a guide on everything you need to know as a level 85 Warlock looking to do top damage in endgame WoW content, be it dungeons or raids or whatever. Now, I know it can be hard to stay competitive on the DPS as a Warlock when you're either not familiar with your spell priority or rotation, your stat priorities, and for that matter, the optimal way your class is actually played. But alright, no worries, okay, I'm here to help you get started on the path to doing tough DPS. So in this video, I'm going to be going over Affliction and everything you need to know about it. For a long time, Affliction Warlocks haven't had an actual DPS rotation. Instead, we've had a priority list that must be maintained in order to achieve optimal DPS. The Affliction Warlock spell priority involves maintaining improved Soulfire up on yourself as close to 100% of the time as possible, and you'll achieve this by either soul burning your Soulfires or hard casting Soulfires. You'll be casting Haunt every time it comes off cooldown, and this will also refresh Corruption for you, so you won't have to worry about it. You'll be casting Bane of Agony every time it falls off the target. You'll be refreshing your Unstable Affliction about 3 to 2 seconds before it ends. You'll be using either Shadow Bolt or Drain Life as filler whenever you're not doing any of these things. And then when the boss reaches 25%, you'll be using Drain Soul instead of Shadow Bolt or Drain Life. Now, in addition to this, if you're ever in a boss fight where you're in melee range, you can also use Shadow Flame whenever it's not on cooldown. The reality of most boss fights is that at some point or another you're going to have to move, so it's important for these moments that you have something that you can cast. So you can always cast either Life Tap to get some mana back so that you don't have to do it later in the fight and thus increasing your DPS. Or if you don't need mana, or you don't think you'll need mana later on in the fight, you can cast Fell Flame to do some damage and also refresh your Unstable Affliction. Lastly, there's Demon Soul. You should be using this whenever it's off cooldown. However, as you get better, you're going to start being able to stack Demon Soul with things like Bloodlust or your own trinket procs, etc. Now, there's two specs you can use as Affliction. One of them involves using Shadow Bolt as your filler, and the other one involves using Drain Life as your filler. Now, personally, I use the Shadow Bolt spec because in equal gear it does a little bit more damage, and the Drain Life spec is actually a little bit latency dependent. So if you don't have very good latency, or if you have bad latency rather, it's not going to work out very well for you. But in the end, it just comes down to personal taste, and I've seen Warlocks use the Drain Life spec successfully, so you just use whatever you're most comfortable with. This is the spec that I currently use. However, I do know some other very good Warlocks that use variations of the spec, such as this one and this one. Now, personally, I chose to spec into Soulburn Seed of Corruption. It's very useful. It'll help you out in a lot of bosses and in a lot of situations. But it's not a requirement. You don't actually need it. On the other hand, this spec, as you can see, chose to get a Curse of Exhaustion instead, which is also very useful, but not a requirement. This other spec chose to get neither. Now, all three of them are viable choices, and when you're forming your decision, you just need to see what your guild needs and what you're most comfortable with. Glyph choices for Affliction Warlocks are fairly standard. There's almost no variation to it. For your prime glyphs, you're going to be using Haunt, Corruption, and Lash of Pain glyphs. You might be wondering why Lash of Pain don't Affliction Warlocks use the Fell Hunter. Well, no. Affliction Warlocks are currently using the Succubus, and combined with the Lash of Pain glyph, it's actually amazing. Besides that, there actually are no good choices for prime glyphs for Affliction Warlocks. For your major glyphs, you're going to be using Glyph of Life Tap, Shadow Bolt, and Soul Swap. But when you're running 5-man heroics or 5-man dungeons, you may need CC. So you're going to be using Glyph of Fear. So you're going to replace either Life Tap or Shadow Bolt glyphs with it. It doesn't really matter. They're both about the same anyway. So you choose whichever one you prefer to leave out. When talking about stats for Warlocks, and casters in general, Intellect is your #1 stat. A common misconception is that hit rating is the most important stat for us, but that's just not true anymore. It's true that in the past, reaching the 17% hit cap was the biggest priority, but while it's still important to be hit cap, it's just not worth sacrificing Intellect for hit rating now. So this means that your gems and your enchants should focus on intellect wherever possible. For gems, in most cases you're going to want a Brilliant Inferno Ruby in red slots, a Reckless Ember Topaz in yellow slots, and a Veiled Demon's Eye in blue slots. Now, if the socket bonus isn't very good, you're going to want to break that socket bonus, just forget about it, and get a Brilliant Inferno Ruby instead. Now, if you're not really sure if the socket bonus is bad or not, just socket for it anyway, and only break the socket bonus if it's something like really obvious it's not very good, something like 10 crit or 10 haste. When it comes to reforging, you're going to want to try to increase your hit rating, since reforging doesn't allow you to increase your intellect. So you're going to want to reforge your mastery or your crit to hit. If you're already hit capped, you should be reforging your mastery and crit to haste instead. And that about does it for the beginner's guide to Affliction. With this, you guys should have a very good place to start out as an Affliction Warlock in Cataclysm. So, if you guys enjoyed what you saw, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll have a lot more content like this up in the future. So that's that, and I'll see you guys later.